I gotta say, I thought 2024 was a pretty bad year for movies, so coming up with a list this year, it felt like I really had to think about it. And as always, there are several movies that I did not watch this year, so if your favorite movie did not end up on this list, it's because I either didn't see it, or I didn't like it as much as you did. So, without any further ado, let's get this list started. Number 6. Deadpool and Wolverine. You all knew this was gonna end up on the list. This movie was so much fun. People wanted to see these 20th Century Fox characters in a movie together ever since the first Deadpool film, and well, after Hugh Jackman gave the go-ahead, it finally happened. Probably the thing I love the most about this movie is that it did not feel like an MCU film. It felt like a 20th Century Fox movie, and I am so relieved. Because if this was turned into a Phase 4 and Phase 5 MCU comedy like She-Hulk or Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, then this could have been a complete disaster. But Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, both being from the Fox regime, they wanted this movie to have an edge to it, and boy did it. This movie was just as violent as the previous Deadpool movies, the action sequences were great, the dynamic between the two heroes was off the charts, and it was overall a really fun time. So why did it not end up higher on this list? Well, the reason this movie is so low on the list is because of two things. The story and the villain. The story involves the multiverse, and although it's better than Marvel's other attempts at it, it was still really weak. It was no Spider-Verse, that's for sure, and as soon as you start asking questions, a lot of things don't make sense. And as much as I love this scene, I still don't think it was built up well. And my family have since seen the movie, and even they didn't know why these Deadpools were all evil. Then Peter shows up, and they're not evil anymore.
This Deadpool's with me.
Holy shit.
That's fucking Peter!
You guys know Peter?
You kidding me? Every Deadpool has a Peter.
I mean, why does this matter? Like they said, every Deadpool has a Peter, so why is this one so special and cause them to stop fighting Deadpool and Wolverine? Honestly, how is this any different to Martha?
That's fucking Peter!
Why did you say that name?
I would understand if all the Deadpools had their Peters killed, but our Deadpool brought him back so he's a rarity. That would have made some sort of sense, but they didn't even do that. And the villain, this is one of the worst villains they could have chosen to have Deadpool and Wolverine fight. When you have two badass superheroes coming together, you need an equally badass and awesome villain. And Goldilocks here is not the one. They didn't even have a proper action sequence with her. And even if they did, she could have just skinned them like she did Johnny. But yeah, as you'd expect with weak writing, she uses that power once and then she never uses it again. The story and villain for this movie really felt half-baked. They got the Deadpool and Wolverine parts right, but everything else was not given the same level of attention. And I really wish they would have treated the deaths of the other Fox Marvel characters with some weight and drama.
There's four. Wait, is it Magneto? God in heaven, let it be Magneto, because with him...
He's dead.
Fuck!
Every time one of us has gone up against her, they die. The Punisher, the Quicksilver, the Daredevil.
Daredevil, I'm so sorry.
It's fine.
Okay.
How is it a movie about the death of a random animal made me more sad than hearing about the death of Daredevil? This should have been an emotional moment, but no, they just comedically dismiss it. All the dead Fox characters are dismissed like this, and upon further viewings, I really took issue with this. So yeah, I loved the Deadpool and Wolverine sections of the movie, and that's why this movie takes a spot on this list. But everything else was just nothing special, and that's why this movie takes a low spot on this list. Number 5. Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I have a versus video in the works between Sonic 2 and 3, so I'll make this brief, but Sonic 3 was a really good sequel. We spend more time with the characters we know and love, the movie focuses even more on the hedgehogs and gives the human characters even less to do, which is always a plus. The addition of Shadow was a very smart choice, and although I think they could have pushed the darkness of his story even further, they managed to get a lot of emotion out of his character and his backstory. The Sonic movies have always had an emotional core to them, and that's what makes them so special. The story was good, the characters were fun, the action was decent, the movie is accurate to its source material, and Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik and Gerald Robotnik, he was absolutely hilarious. And I still say that if they make another Sonic movie, then it has to have Jim Carrey in it. If not, then the movie will really be missing something. The Sonic movies have really come a long way from this abomination to now being a billion-dollar franchise, one that actually has made Disney sweat, and I had a lot of fun with it, and that's why it takes a spot on this list. Number 4. Smile 2. This is an interesting one, isn't it? Considering the first Smile movie ended up on my worst of list, I was quite surprised to see the second one on my best list. I thought this movie was just so much better than the first film. It was scarier, gorier, I found myself liking all these characters much more, the demon had more of a personality this time round, Naomi Scott delivered one of the best performances of the year, and the biggest thing that this movie had over the first film was the ending. The first movie was great, but it was the terrible ending which destroyed the movie for me. But the second film's ending is what made the movie movie for me. The ending in the first Smile just felt like a forced twist horror movie ending, and it didn't feel earned. But in the second movie, it made a lot more sense, and it felt totally earned. Now the ending is not tight. It makes you see the whole movie in a different way, and this is great. But it does make you ask questions. Questions that I don't think the movie has answers to. But I came away with more of the positives than the negatives. The ending just opened the floodgates for what could happen in this world going forward, that it really ended the movie on the highest high that it could. I reviewed this movie in more detail, so check that out if you want to know my in-depth thoughts on the film. But I really like the movie, and this time round, it earned a spot on this list. Number 3. Transformers 1. If you want to know why this best movies list took so long, this movie was the reason. I wanted to watch it before I made this list, and I am so glad I did. Ever since Transformers 3, I have said that I wanted no more Transformers movies with humans, and I wanted a movie where we see the war on Cybertron. But instead, we kept getting more safe Transformers movies that kept getting worse. Bumblebee started out great with his 2-minute Cybertron sequence, but then it went back to the humans. And although it was a good movie, it is not what I was looking for in a Transformers film. And when I heard they were finally going to make the Transformers movies that I wanted, but as an animated movie and done by the Toy Story 4 director, I lost all interest. But even though I still want that live-action Transformers Cybertron movie, I'm glad to say this movie did give me most of what I wanted. This is so much better than those tired Michael Bay sequels and actually takes the franchise in the right direction for once. Transformers 1 entirely takes place on Cybertron, and although it starts off kinda kiddie, as it develops, it becomes surprisingly adult too. It has adult themes of corruption with our military, corruption with our leaders, and how they steal resources and take advantage of lower-class citizens. That is surprisingly deep for a PG movie, and even some of the things it does when D16 makes us turn into Megatron is also surprisingly dark and cruel. The third act is what really makes this movie. Now, I don't think this movie is as accessible to non-Transformers fans. I also think that the movie could have come together a lot better in the end if the script had some rewrites. Like I said earlier, the third act makes this movie. I just wish the second act was more tight and focused with its writing, because I thought not every twist had the impact that the writers and directors wanted it to have, and I thought it could have been stronger. All the pieces are there for this movie to be amazing, but there are some structural problems. Mainly, I feel like Megatron's development was quite rushed and needed to be handled with more time and care. As a result, it ended up being good, but not great. His sudden burst of anger felt very sudden and not natural, like say Harvey Dent's burst of anger in The Dark Knight. It also suffers with some of the issues that the early Transformers movies had. When things got chaotic on screen, I was like, which Transformer am I looking at right now? There is a lot of exposition in the movie as well. And without a doubt, the biggest thing that I hated the most in this movie was Keegan-Michael Key as Bumblebee. I've said this before, but I can't stand Key. He was good in his Key and Peele skits, but I hate whenever he is cast in a movie. He is always typecast as the loud, unfunny comic relief.
Oh, Steve! No! I am so sorry. We can fix it, don't worry, Dad. Steve!
Watch this. Knife hand!
And this is by far the worst version of the character I have ever seen. This is only Bumblebee by name, and I don't think they could have made him worse if they tried. And for a movie that understands the Transformers this well, I find it hard to believe that they would do this. So I wonder if this was a studio note by some clueless executive who wanted a loud and obnoxious character for the kids to laugh at, because this choice does not make sense given how smart the rest of its creative choices were. So that aside, this was a really good movie. There were just some things that were holding it back. But still, I thought it deserved a spot on this list. Number 2. The Wild Robot. Yeah, this was another reason this list took longer to make. I heard so many great things about this film, and I did not watch a single trailer for it. And yeah, everyone was right. This is one gem of an animated movie, and it is by far the biggest surprise of the year. Now, when I watched the first half of the film, I thought to myself, this is good, but I don't see how it's so great. It wasn't until the flying lesson where I was like, okay, now I get it. This is legitimately charming and genuine. That's when it had me, and I was 100% with it. And this is where it went from being a kid's movie to being something emotional, sweet, and very special. It's right here where the movie became emotionally deeper, and it felt like it had really matured. It just becomes sad, but simultaneously uplifting and nice. It was really nice and reminded me of the feel-good family animated movies that I used to watch as a kid. Movies such as The Iron Giant, but it doesn't feel like an inferior copy. It feels like its own original concept. It clearly takes several inspirations from other properties, but it executes them in a way that feels very original. And the score from Chris Bowers is absolutely amazing. The main theme in particular is so well done and is what really makes these scenes so emotional. Without the music, this movie wouldn't be as effective as it is, and it wouldn't be as high up on this list either. And the voice acting was so good. I had no idea the wild robot was voiced by Lupita Nyong'o, and I had no idea the voice of the fox was Pedro Pascal. This is by far the best animated movie of the year. I liked this better than Moana 2, and I liked it better than Inside Out 2. This movie gave me the quality and the emotional resonance that I wanted from Disney. And these are the kinds of riveting and emotional stories that you would usually expect to see from Disney. This movie had layers to the emotion it was trying to convey, and felt like it elevated the kind of emotional storytelling that you can do for family animation. Meanwhile, Inside Out 2 and Moana 2 were just by the numbers with what they were trying to accomplish. They weren't advancing the kind of emotional storytelling that can be done in family movies. So the wild robot of all things has really shown Disney up. And what's all the better is that it was made by Chris Sanders, who wrote and directed Lilo and Stitch, and then he left Disney after his terrible experience with Bolt and moved over to DreamWorks, where he did How to Train Your Dragon, and now this. So Disney lost to one of their own people who they mistreated. They probably should have listened to his ideas, The Wild Robot could have been a Disney movie. Or maybe not quite the version we got, because this is a very mean movie. The Wild Robot character gets a ton of abuse in the first act of the movie, and there is a ton of animals getting killed by other animals too, and it can get surprisingly graphic at times. This movie really had a hard edge to it, like the movies I grew up with used to, and it's another reason why I loved it. The Wild Robot is a great movie, and it gets better the more I think about it, and it's a movie that I really want to watch again, and that's why it takes a top spot on this list. Number 1. Boy Kills World. This was actually a movie that was recommended to me by one of you guys. I did a trailer reaction of this film on my Patreon as a special request, and the movie caught my interest, but I didn't expect it to be as freaking good as it ended up being. Think The Raid mixed with John Wick and elements of Upgrade and even Snowpiercer thrown in there, and a ton of foreign martial arts movies. The action in this movie is so good, it does not feel like a typical Hollywood action movie, and it even has a ton of humor thrown in there as well. It's intense, hilarious, and what surprised me the most was the twist in the movie. All the signs were there from the very beginning, but I did not see the twist coming, and it makes you rethink everything you just saw. Except, unlike Smile 2, it actually makes sense. What makes this action movie different is our main protagonist. Boy, played by Bill Skarsgård, he is on a revenge mission to kill the people who murdered his family when he was a child. He is then raised by this old man who trains him to fight and take his revenge. The only drawback though is that Boy is mute and deaf. He doesn't know what people sound like, so he makes up voices for them in his head that sound like Street Fighter characters that he used to play when he was not deaf as a kid, and because he doesn't know what his voice sounds like, he gives himself a badass voice whenever he is thinking to himself in his head, and we the audience get to hear his constant narration. This gives us our way into what the character is thinking, and there are other times where he gets the lip reading wrong because people's mouths are covered, and he misinterprets what they say, and it's really funny. This movie really does think out of the box and takes full advantage of its concepts, and it doesn't just play into it comedically, but it also plays into it emotionally. Of all the films to come out this year, this by far is the movie that surprised me the most. It's not a deep film, but it is by far the most fun I've had watching a movie this year, and it's exactly my kind of film. It's produced by Sam Raimi, who attaches his name to a lot of fun movies, and this one is probably my favorite one. You should also watch Don't Move, that's another really good one. This was the perfect experimental action movie, and it just worked for me on every single level. All these reasons and more is why Boy Kills World is my favorite movie of 2024. So, that's it. It's hard to believe that 2024 is over, and it might not have been a great year for everyone, but here's hoping 2025 will change that. From the bottom of my heart, a big thank you to all of you who continue to watch and support the channel. I have plenty more videos planned for 2025, and I will also be massively upping the content on my Patreon, so feel free to become a member so you can also be a part of that content. And here's to 2025. Except, my job isn't done just yet. We still have one more list to make. Thanks again for watching everyone, and I will see all of you very soon. Take care.